what Dr. Slutkin did with a number of other kind of physicians and community health specialists is take what we know in public health, but specifically around epidemic control, and apply it to violence, right? And so that's three things that you do in any epidemic control program: is you interrupt the transmission, prevent future spread, and change group and community norms, right? And so this is for, like, we're thinking about the most acute cases or the most acute scenarios where violence is the highest, right? And so in the first part of interrupting the transmission, this is where the idea of the violence interrupter came forward. And these are folks who are from a community, from groups that potentially were involved in violence, and their job is really to use their relationships to identify and detect when conflicts are brewing, and use that same relationship to try and step in and either mediate the conflict, shut the conflict down, or if something does take place, use that same relationship to try and prevent retaliation, right? And so this is like kind of the tip of the intervention, right? The first part of it is really trying to interrupt the transmission, to really trying to stop the back and forth of violent events that are occurring at a community level, right? So that's the first part of the intervention. The second, in terms of preventing future spread, this really gets to what we know about really behavior change and working more long-term with folks that are likely to be involved in violence. And so we have a category of workers called outreach workers. And in a lot of other scenarios, they're known as like community health workers. I mean, this is very kind of common practice around the world, not so much in the US, or it wasn't. And the outreach worker, their job is really to work, again, more long-term with folks that are likely to be involved in violence. And again, they come from the community, many times have had very similar experiences, or family members have, and are really trusted and credible, right? And they work, like I said, long-term, of really trying to help folks with whatever they might want help with, right? But really focusing on changing some of the behaviors by building the skill sets and providing more information for folks not having to respond to violence so quickly, if that makes any sense. Like, that's instead of the first option, maybe it's the fourth option or the fifth option. And then the third part of kind of our approach in any epidemic control model has to do with changing group and community norms around the acceptability, in this case, of using violence. And that's done through public education campaigns, that's done through different events, different messaging. And it's also done by kind of interjecting this idea of being able to have kind of a community infrastructure in place. And what do I mean? I mean that, like, before interrupters and outreach workers are working, if you and I are into it, there's really no one for me to call. There's, you know what I mean? There's no kind of infrastructure. I'm not going to call the police. I'm not going to tell my teacher, like that's not even an option in most cases. And so where some of the kind of community norm change happens is when there are violence interrupters and outreach workers who are from there, that know the community, that are trusted, folks start to reach out to them, right? This becomes a new norm. Like, instead of us just being at it, we're able to reach out to someone, and that's step one. Step two is even agreeing to be part of some sort of mediation process, right? Is kind of a new behavior, a new norm, and abiding by these conflicts, abiding by these interruptions or mediations are kind of new community norms that might have existed before, right? Before the war on drugs and all these other things, but and many times it's almost like a revisiting of how communities have dealt with stuff before, right? And so I think that's really where we get to some of the community norm change about it. So that's at a very high level, the approach, as we understand it, and it kind of being a epidemic control within the public health lens of violence prevention.